You know that moment when you're standing in line at the coffee shop and someone next to you says something about the weather and you just freeze? Or maybe you're at a party and you want to join a conversation, but you have no idea what to say? Yeah, I've been there too. And honestly, it's one of the most uncomfortable feelings in the world. But here's the thing, small talk doesn't have to be scary. In fact, once you have a few go-to phrases in your back pocket, it becomes so much easier. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share 100 small talk sentences with you. Not complicated, fancy English, just simple, everyday phrases that native speakers use all the time. And I'm going to break them down so you understand when to use them, how to use them, and why they work. Because small talk isn't just about filling silence. It's about connecting with people, building relationships, and making life a little bit warmer and friendlier. So let's start with greetings, because that's where most conversations begin, right? The first thing you might say to someone is, "Hey, how's it going?" This is super casual, super common. You'll hear this everywhere from the grocery store to the office. And the cool thing about this phrase is that most people don't expect a long answer. They're just being friendly. You can respond with something simple like, "Pretty good, thanks," or "Not bad, how about you?" Another really common one is, "What's up?" This one's even more casual. You'll hear it a lot with friends or people you know pretty well. And honestly, most people just say, "Not much," or "Hey, what's up?" right back. It's less of a real question and more of a way to say hello. Now, if you want to be a little more polite or formal, you might say, "How are you doing today?" This one's nice because it shows you care a little bit more. Maybe you're talking to a coworker you don't know super well or someone at the front desk of a hotel. It's friendly but still respectful. Then there's "Good to see you." This is perfect when you're meeting someone you already know. Maybe you haven't seen them in a while, or maybe you just saw them yesterday. Either way, it's a warm, easy way to start a conversation. And people love hearing this because it makes them feel valued. If you're running into someone unexpectedly, you might say, "Oh wow, fancy seeing you here." This one's a little playful. It's great when you bump into a friend at the store or at a restaurant. It shows you're surprised in a good way. Okay, so now let's talk about the weather, because yes, people really do talk about the weather all the time. I know it seems boring, but it's actually one of the easiest ways to start a conversation with anyone. You can say, "Nice weather we're having, huh?" This works on a sunny day, obviously. And the "huh" at the end makes it sound more conversational, like you're inviting the other person to agree with you. On a rainy day, you might say, "Looks like it's going to rain all day." People love to complain about the weather, so this usually gets a response. Someone might say, "I know I didn't bring an umbrella," and then boom, you've got a conversation going. If it's really hot outside, you could say, "Man, it's hot out there." Simple, right? But it works. People will usually agree with you and maybe share how they're dealing with the heat. And in the winter, you might hear, "It's freezing today, isn't it?" Again, that "isn't it" at the end invites a response. It's a tag question, and it makes the sentence feel less like a statement and more like a conversation starter. Another good one is, "I heard it's supposed to warm up this weekend." This shows you're paying attention to the forecast, and it gives people something to look forward to. People like talking about upcoming weather because it affects their plans. Now let's move on to compliments, because everyone loves a good compliment, and it's one of the easiest ways to make someone smile. You could say, "I love your shoes." This is so simple but so effective. If you notice something nice about what someone's wearing, just say it. Most people will light up and say thank you, and then you've opened the door to more conversation. You could also say, "That's a great color on you." This works for clothing, nail polish, whatever. It's specific enough that it feels genuine, but it's not too personal or weird. If someone's carrying a cool bag or wearing an interesting accessory, you might say, "Where did you get that? I love it." Now you're not just complimenting them, you're also asking a question, which keeps the conversation going. For hairstyles, you could say, "Your hair looks amazing." People spend a lot of time on their hair, so they usually appreciate when someone notices. And if someone looks particularly put together, you might say, "You look great today." This is friendly and warm without being too intense. All right, now let's talk about some phrases you can use when you're at work or in a professional setting. These are still casual, but they're appropriate for the office. You might say, "How was your weekend?" This is classic Monday morning small talk. Everyone asks this, and it's a nice way to ease into the work week. On a Friday, you could say, "Any fun plans for the weekend?" People love talking about their plans, and it shows you're interested in their life outside of work. If someone looks busy, you might say, "You've got a lot going on today, huh?" This shows empathy, and it gives them a chance to vent if they need to. After a meeting, you could say, "That meeting went well, don't you think?" This can open up a conversation about work stuff without being too heavy. And if you're new to a job or meeting someone for the first time at work, you might say, "So, how long have you been working here?" It's a simple question that helps you get to know your coworkers better. Another good one is, "Are you working on anything interesting?" This is great because it shows you're curious about what they do, and most people like talking about their projects. If you're in the break room, you might say, "I need my coffee this morning." Everyone can relate to this, and it's a lighthearted way to connect. Or you could say, "Is it Friday yet?" This is a classic. People love bonding over how long the week feels. Now let's talk about some phrases you can use when you're out and about, maybe at the gym, at a coffee shop, or just around your neighborhood. If you're at the gym and you see someone regularly, you might say, "I see you here all the time. You must be really dedicated." This is a compliment and a conversation starter. At a coffee shop, you could say to the barista, "What do you recommend?" This shows you trust their expertise, and baristas usually love sharing their favorite drinks. If you're waiting in line somewhere, you might say to the person next to you, "This line is taking forever, isn't it?" Complaining together is actually a great bonding experience. If you're at a park and you see someone with a dog, you could say, "Your dog is so cute. What's their name?" Dog owners love talking about their dogs, so this is almost always a winner. If you're at a bookstore, you might say to someone browsing nearby, "Have you read?" That one, I've been thinking about picking it up. Book lovers usually enjoy sharing their opinions. At the grocery store, if someone's looking at something you've tried, you could say, "Oh, that's really good. I just bought it last week." People appreciate recommendations. If you're at a restaurant and someone's meal looks amazing, you might say, "Wow, that looks delicious. What did you order?" Obviously, you'd say this to someone you're dining with, not a stranger at another table. But it's a great way to show interest. Now, let's talk about some phrases for when you're making plans or talking about activities. You might say, "We should grab coffee sometime." This is super casual and doesn't require committing to a specific time, which makes it low pressure. Or you could say, "Let me know if you ever want to hang out." Again, this is friendly and open without being pushy. If someone mentions they like a certain activity, you could say, "I've been wanting to try that. Maybe we could go together." This shows genuine interest and creates an opportunity to do something fun. When you're wrapping up a conversation, you might say, "It was great talking to you." This is polite and leaves a positive impression. Or you could say, "Let's catch up soon." This suggests that you enjoyed the conversation and you'd like to continue it another time. If you're saying goodbye to a coworker at the end of the day, you might say, "Have a good evening." It's simple but thoughtful. On a Friday, you could say, "Have a great weekend." Everyone loves hearing this. And if someone's about to go on a trip or do something special, you might say, "Have fun, I hope it goes well." All right, now let's talk about some phrases for when you're at social events, like parties or gatherings. These can feel intimidating, but having a few phrases ready makes it so much easier. When you first arrive, you might say to the host, "Thanks so much for inviting me." This is polite and shows appreciation. If you don't know many people at the party, you could approach someone and say, "Hi, I'm Sarah. How do you know the host?" This is a great icebreaker because it gives you something to talk about right away. If you're standing near the food table, you might say to someone nearby, "Have you tried the dip? It's amazing." Food is always a safe topic. If you see someone standing alone, you could say, "Mind if I join you?" This is friendly and most people will appreciate that you're being inclusive. When you're talking to someone new, you might ask, "So, what do you do?" This is a standard question, but it works because it gives people a chance to talk about themselves. Or you could ask, "Do you live around here?" This can lead to conversations about neighborhoods, favorite local spots, and more. If someone mentions a hobby or interest, you could say, "That sounds really interesting. How did you get into that?" People love talking about their passions. When you're ready to leave a party, you might say to the host, "I had such a great time. Thanks again for having me." This leaves a good impression. Now let's talk about some phrases for when you're dealing with everyday situations, like running errands or interacting with service workers. When you're at a store and an employee asks if you need help, you might say, "I'm just browsing, thanks." This is polite and lets them know you're fine on your own. Or if you do need help, you could say, "Actually, yes, I'm looking for this specific thing. Can you point me in the right direction?" When you're checking out, you might say to the cashier, "How's your day going?" This is a small gesture, but it can brighten someone's day. If someone holds the door for you, you should definitely say, "Thank you, I appreciate it." It's simple but important. When you're at a restaurant and the server brings your food, you could say, "This looks great, thank you." It shows appreciation for their service. If you need something extra, you might say, "Could I get some extra napkins when you get a chance?" The phrase, "when you get a chance," makes it sound less demanding. When you're leaving a restaurant, you could say to the server, "Everything was delicious, thank you so much." Tips are important, but kind words matter too. All right, let's talk about some phrases for when you're talking to neighbors or people in your community. If you see a neighbor outside, you might say, "Hey there, beautiful day, isn't it?" This is friendly and acknowledges the shared experience of being outside. If you notice they're working on a project, you could say, "That looks like a big project. How's it going?" This shows interest and can lead to a longer conversation. If you have new neighbors, you might introduce yourself by saying, "Hi, I'm Sarah from next door. Welcome to the neighborhood." This is warm and welcoming. If you're borrowing something, you could say, "Would it be okay if I borrowed your ladder? I'll bring it back this afternoon." Always be specific about when you'll return things. When you return something, you should say, "Thanks so much for letting me borrow this. I really appreciate it." If there's a neighborhood event, you might say to a neighbor, "Are you going to the block party? I think it'll be fun." This can help build community. Now let's talk about phrases you can use when you're dealing with technology or modern life. If you're having trouble with your phone or computer, you might say to someone nearby, "Do you know anything about phones? Mine's acting weird." Sometimes people are happy to help. If someone's taking a photo and you offer to help, you could say, "Do you want me to take a picture for you so you can all be in it?" People really appreciate this. When you're on public transportation and someone's sitting in your seat, you might politely say, "Excuse me, I think that might be my seat. Can I check your ticket?" This is direct but polite. If you're in a coffee shop and all the tables are taken, you could ask someone sitting alone, "Is this seat taken? Do you mind if I sit here?" Most people will say yes. When you're using shared spaces like a gym or library, you might ask, "Are you done with this equipment?" Or, "Are you finished with that book?" This is courteous. Let's talk about some phrases for when you're dealing with problems or challenges. If something goes wrong, you might say, "Well, that didn't go as planned." This acknowledges the situation with a bit of humor. If you're running late, you could text someone, "So sorry, running about 10 minutes behind. Be there soon." It's important to communicate. When you make a mistake, you should say, "My bad, I didn't realize." This is a casual way to apologize. If you bump into someone, you'd say, "Oh, excuse me, sorry about that." Basic manners go a long way. When someone apologizes to you, you can respond with, "No worries, it's all good." This lets them know there are no hard feelings. If you need to interrupt a conversation politely, you might say, "Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to mention something real quick." The key is acknowledging that you're interrupting. Now, let's talk about some phrases that show you're actively listening and engaged in a conversation. When someone tells you something, you might respond with, "Oh, really? Tell me more about that." This encourages them to keep talking. You could also say, "That's so interesting, I didn't know that." This validates what they're saying. If someone's telling you about a problem, you might say, "That sounds really frustrating." This shows empathy. When someone shares good news, you should definitely say, "That's awesome, I'm so happy for you." Genuine excitement is contagious. If someone's explaining something complex, you could say, "Okay, let me make sure I understand." Then repeat it back to them. This shows you're really listening. When someone makes a joke, even if it's not that funny, you can chuckle and say, "Ha, that's funny." Social lubrication is important. If someone's talking about something you don't know much about, you might say, "I don't know much about that. What's it like?" People love being the expert. Let's talk about phrases for expressing agreement or disagreement politely. If you agree with someone, you could say, "Yeah, I totally get what you mean." This validates their perspective. You could also say, "I feel the same way about that." This creates connection. If you partially agree, you might say, "I see your point, and I think there's also another side to it." This acknowledges their view while adding your own. If you disagree but want to be polite, you could say, I never thought about it that way. I tend to think differently about it." This is diplomatic. You could also use, "That's an interesting perspective. I've always approached it differently." This doesn't shut them down. Now let's talk about some phrases for when conversations are winding down. If there's a natural pause and you need to go, you might say, "Well, I should probably get going." This is a gentle way to exit. You could also say, "I don't want to keep you. I'm sure you're busy." This is considerate. If you've been talking for a while, you might say, "This has been really nice. We should do this again." This leaves the door open. When you're ending a phone call, you could say, "All right, I'll let you go. Talk soon." This is friendly and casual. If you're saying goodbye to someone you'll see soon, you might say, "See you tomorrow." Simple and appropriate. For someone you won't see for a while, you could say, "Take care. Hope to see you again soon." All right, let's talk about some phrases for showing interest in other people. When someone mentions, "They went." Somewhere you could ask, "Oh, how was that? Did you have a good time?" This shows you care. If someone mentions a hobby, you might say, "How long have you been doing that?" People love talking about their interests. When someone's wearing something from a specific place or team, you could say, "Oh, are you a fan? Have you been to a game?" Sports fans especially love this. If someone mentions their family, you could ask, "How old are your kids?" Or, "What do they like to do?" People love talking about their children. When someone mentions a pet, you should definitely ask, "What kind of dog do you have?" Pet owners will talk about their animals all day. If someone mentions they're from somewhere else, you could say, "Oh, I've always wanted to visit there. What's it like?" This shows genuine curiosity. Let's talk about phrases for specific situations, like being at the doctor's office or dealing with customer service. When you're at the doctor and they ask how you're feeling, you might say, "I've been having this pain in my shoulder for a few days." Be specific. When you're talking to customer service, you could start with, "Hi, I'm having an issue with this product I bought. Can you help me?" Being polite but direct works best. If you're returning something to a store, you might say, "I bought this last week, but it didn't fit right. Can I exchange it?" Honesty is the best policy. When you're at a hair salon, you could say to the stylist, "I'm thinking about trying something new. What would you suggest?" They're the experts. If you're at a car repair shop, you might say, "My car's been making this weird noise. Can someone take a look?" Describe the problem clearly. Now let's talk about some phrases that are just generally useful in everyday life. When someone does something nice for you, always say, "I really appreciate that." "Thank you." gratitude matters. If you're offering to help someone, you could say, "Let me know if you need a hand with that." This is friendly and not pushy. When you're giving someone a compliment, try to be specific. Instead of just "nice shirt," say, "That color really suits you." Specific compliments feel more genuine. If you're asking for advice, you might say, "I'm trying to decide between these two options. What would you do?" People like being asked for their opinion. When someone gives you advice, even if you don't plan to follow it, say, "That's a good point. I'll think about that. This is respectful." If you're making a suggestion, you could say, "Have you thought about trying this?" Frame it as a question, not a directive. When you're expressing concern, you might say, "Are you okay? You seem a little off today." This shows you care. If someone seems stressed, you could offer, "Do you want to talk about it? I'm here if you need to vent." Sometimes people just need to be heard. All right, let's wrap this up with some final thoughts. Small talk isn't about being fake or superficial. It's about being human, connecting with other humans, and making the world feel a little less lonely. Every conversation starts somewhere, and usually it's with something simple, something small. The key to good small talk is being genuinely interested in other people. When you ask someone how their day is going, really listen to their answer. When you compliment someone's shoes, mean it. When you talk about the weather, use it as a bridge to something deeper. And remember, most people are just as nervous about small talk as you are. They're wondering what to say, how to keep the conversation going, whether they sound weird. So when you take the initiative and start a conversation, you're actually doing them a favor. You're making it easier for everyone. Practice these phrases. Use them in your daily life. Start with the easy ones like "How's it going?" or "Nice weather today." Then work your way up to the more complex ones. Before you know it, small talk will feel natural. You won't have to think about it. It'll just flow. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you master small talk, you can turn it into big talk. That conversation about the weather can become a conversation about favorite vacation spots. That compliment about someone's shoes can become a conversation about fashion or shopping or where they like to go. Small talk is just the doorway. Where you go from there is up to you. So go out there and talk to people. Say hi to your neighbor. Compliment a stranger. Ask the barista about their day. Make eye contact. Smile. Be present. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to connect with other people. And small talk, as small as it seems, is one of the most important tools we have for doing that. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope this was helpful. Now go practice. Start a conversation. Make someone smile. And remember, every big friendship started with something small.